Welcome to History Reimagined channel. Subscribe now so you don't miss more videos like this one.
British women work as bricklayers during World War I in 1914. Construction trades had been exclusively male for centuries, yet labor shortages created by mass military conscription forced industries to hire women for physically demanding roles previously considered biologically impossible for them. 22 officials manually verified track and field results at the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. This labor-intensive confirmation system was immediately replaced by electronic photo finish technology, making Tokyo the last games where human judgment alone determined medal-winning margins between athletes. A teacher leads her students in prayer at a one-room Tennessee schoolhouse in 1940. American public school prayer remained constitutionally protected until the Supreme Court's landmark 1962 Engel versus Vitale ruling declared state-sponsored classroom prayer an unconstitutional establishment of religion. A couple shares a romantic moment in a Los Angeles convertible in 1951. Post-war American car culture transformed automobiles from transportation into social spaces, with drive-in theaters, restaurants, and lovers' lanes becoming defining institutions of 1950s suburban romantic life. Spanish actress Carmen Sevilla takes the ceremonial kickoff between Alianza Lima and Sheffield United in 1967. Celebrity kickoffs were common promotional tools for international football matches, with clubs using famous faces to attract media coverage and larger paying audiences to stadiums. Two Quebec boys proudly display a massive codfish they caught in 1943. Atlantic cod had sustained Canadian coastal communities for 500 years, yet decades of industrial overfishing would collapse the entire Grand Bank stock by 1992, destroying the fishery permanently. Estate managers ride llamas on the Wingfields' English property in 1911. Wealthy Edwardian landowners frequently imported exotic South American camelids as fashionable novelties, their presence reflecting Britain's imperial connections that made acquiring unusual animals from distant colonies both affordable and socially prestigious. Children repair their toy vehicles in the 1950s. Post-war American toy manufacturing boomed as returning veterans started families, with pedal cars and miniature vehicles becoming childhood status symbols, reflecting the era's automobile-obsessed culture and unprecedented middle-class consumer prosperity. A girl hangs her kittens on a washing line in 1931. This charming Depression-era photograph captured innocent childhood playfulness during one of history's darkest economic periods, when simple domestic amusements provided children genuine joy amid their family's profound financial hardship. A mother and daughter photographed in Spain between 1958 to 1963. Franco's Spain during this period was experiencing rapid economic modernization through the Spanish miracle. Yet rural families like this one remained largely untouched by prosperity, transforming the country's industrial urban centers. Robert De Niro, Giorgio Armani, and Martin Scorsese on Casino's 1995 set. Armani personally designed the film's 52 costumes for De Niro, with the period-accurate 1970s Las Vegas wardrobe requiring meticulous research into an era Armani himself had lived through firsthand. Young Jewish men danced together in mandatory Palestine. Hora circle dancing became a defining symbol of Zionist pioneer identity, with labor Zionist movements deliberately promoting communal folk dancing as a way to forge collective national identity among immigrants from dozens of different countries. President Roosevelt inspects troops alongside Liberian President Barclay at an airstrip outside Monrovia on January 27, 1943. This historic meeting made Roosevelt the first sitting U.S. president to visit Africa, establishing America's crucial wartime relationship with one of its oldest African allies. Italian special effects artist Carlo Rambaldi poses with his E.T. creation on the 1982 film set. Rambaldi built 3 mechanical E.T. puppets at a cost of $1.5 million, winning his 3rd Academy Award for a creature that became cinema's most beloved extraterrestrial character. An Iranian general displays his physical fitness in a public demonstration. Iranian military culture under the Islamic Republic emphasized physical strength as both personal virtue and revolutionary readiness, with senior officers regularly performing public fitness demonstrations to project institutional vigor and discipline. Courtney Cox photographed in 1985, 8 years before becoming Monica Geller on Friends. The unknown actress had just appeared in Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark video, her selection from 3,000 auditioners, launching her from complete obscurity into television history. President Reagan and Soviet leader Gorbachev meet at Moscow's Red Square in May 1988. Their summit marked the Cold War's dramatic turning point, with Reagan famously retracting his Evil Empire label as Gorbachev's glasnost reforms began dismantling the Soviet system from within. Seiko's 1982 TV watch seemed like science fiction technology at launch. The world's first functional television wristwatch required a separate tuner unit carried in a pocket, yet its existence proved consumer electronics miniaturization was advancing faster than most futurists had predicted. Survivors photographed at Webelin concentration camp in Germany in 1945. American soldiers who liberated the camp were so horrified they forced nearby German civilians to tour the facility and bury victims, confronting local populations with atrocities committed in their immediate communities. Saddam Hussein photographed at the beginning of his Ba'ath Party career in 1960. Within 9 years, he would orchestrate a coup seizing Iraqi state security, and by 1979, he had eliminated all rivals to become one of the 20th century's most brutal dictators. Brigitte Bardot poses behind a heart-shaped frame in a classic portrait. The French actress became so synonymous with sex appeal that philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote an entire essay analyzing Bardot's cultural significance as post-war France's most powerful global export. A 1913 Lanchester 38 horsepower tourer represents British automotive engineering at its Edwardian peak. Lanchester pioneered numerous innovations including disc brakes and worm drive transmission, yet the company's refusal to adopt standardized manufacturing eventually forced merger with Daimler in 1931. Italy declares war on France and Britain on June 10, 1940. Mussolini waited until France's imminent collapse before entering the conflict, calculating he could claim territorial spoils at minimal military cost, a cynical opportunism Churchill famously condemned as stabbing France in the back. London's Crystal Palace stands in its full Victorian glory. Originally built for the 1851 Great Exhibition, from 300,000 panes of glass and 5,000 iron columns. This revolutionary prefabricated structure was disassembled and relocated to Sydenham Hill, before tragically burning in 1936. Eskimo performers demonstrate the wolf dance in 1914. Indigenous Arctic ceremonial dances served spiritual, social, and pedagogical functions simultaneously, teaching younger generations ancestral relationships with animals whose behaviors and movements were mimicked with extraordinary precision during elaborate ritual performances. Parisian children celebrate liberation in 1944. France's liberation began August 19th, when Paris police staged an uprising, with Free French forces entering 4 days later, specifically so French troops rather than American soldiers would be photographed liberating their own capital city. Massive logging trucks transport giant sequoia trunks across America. These trees, some over 3,000 years old and 300 feet tall, were logged commercially from the 1860s until conservationists discovered the ancient wood was too brittle for practical lumber, ending the industry. Brothers Weldon and Jasper "Sleepy" Drake perform at a Farm Security Administration labor camp dance in Weslaco, Texas. The FSA documented migrant worker cultural life to humanize impoverished families and build public support for New Deal agricultural assistance programs. A makeshift cafe operates inside the Warsaw Ghetto. Despite deliberate Nazi starvation policies limiting inhabitants to 184 calories daily, Warsaw's Jewish community maintained cultural institutions including cafes, theaters, and schools as acts of spiritual resistance against systematic dehumanization. French actor Alain Delon practices his autograph in 1960 while preparing for Purple Noon. Delon was so unknown at the time that director René Clément cast him specifically for his anonymous face, unaware he was launching one of European cinema's greatest careers. Competitors race with pancakes at Bettis Shopping Center in Newport in 1975. Shrove Tuesday pancake races trace their origins to 1445 Olney, England, where a housewife supposedly ran to church still holding her frying pan, creating a tradition now celebrated internationally. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi surveys damage at his Bab el-Azizia palace following American airstrikes in November 1986, the U.S. bombing campaign, codenamed Operation El Dorado Canyon, was retaliation for the Libyan-linked Berlin discotheque bombing that killed American servicemen weeks earlier. Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard in Baltimore photographed in 1943. This facility produced 385 Liberty ships during World War II, with workers completing some vessels in just 4 days using revolutionary prefabricated construction techniques that Henry Kaiser developed by applying Ford's automotive assembly line principles to shipbuilding. A Japanese family watches Apollo 11's lunar landing live on television in 1969. An estimated 600 million people worldwide watched the moonwalk simultaneously, making it history's first truly global shared television moment and demonstrating television's unprecedented power to unite humanity across cultural boundaries. Martin Scorsese directs on The Taxi Driver set in 1976. The film's $1.9 million budget forced Scorsese to shoot night scenes using New York's actual streets during a garbage strike, accidentally creating the film's iconic atmosphere of urban decay and social deterioration. Kaiser Wilhelm II and Tsar Nicholas II meet pleasantly in early 1914. The two cousins, both grandsons of Queen Victoria, would be commanding opposing armies within months, their personal friendship unable to prevent the diplomatic failures triggering World War I's catastrophic outbreak. A B-17 waist gunner struggles for footing amid cascading spent brass cartridges during a bombing mission. Aerial gunners fired thousands of rounds per sortie, with ejected casings accumulating so rapidly they created genuine physical hazards threatening crew mobility during combat emergencies. German Jewish WWI veteran Richard Stern displays his Iron Cross outside his store, while a Nazi soldier guards it in 1933. Stern's military service offered zero protection against anti-Semitic persecution. He later emigrated to America and fought against the same Germany that had once decorated him. An abandoned cement mixer truck near Winganon, Oklahoma, was painted to resemble a NASA space capsule in 1971. Locals transformed the accident scene into folk art after salvage proved impossible, creating an unexpected roadside landmark that attracted curious travelers for decades afterward. Sophie Marceau photographed in 1996. The French actress had already starred in Braveheart and would soon play a Bond villain in The World Is Not Enough, yet remained deeply ambivalent about Hollywood stardom, consistently choosing European art cinema projects over American blockbuster offers. British women changed discreetly on a beach in 1929. Victorian-era bathing machine carriages that had provided private changing facilities were disappearing by this decade, forcing beachgoers to develop elaborate modesty strategies as mixed-gender public swimming finally became socially acceptable across Britain. Two Inuit girls in northern Canada cuddle puppies in 1951. Sled dogs were integral to Arctic survival, with Inuit families raising dogs from birth to ensure pack loyalty, yet the Canadian government controversially slaughtered thousands of sled dogs between 1950 to 1970 to force sedentary settlement. Princess Diana attends a cystic fibrosis patient's funeral. Her willingness to personally mourn alongside ordinary families with sick children transformed royal public engagement, demonstrating genuine emotional connection that made her globally beloved and permanently reshaped expectations of the British monarchy's public role. Letitia Costa photographed in the 1990s. The Corsican model became Marianne, France's national symbol, in 1999, selected by French mayors over Brigitte Bardot and Catherine Deneuve as the living embodiment of liberty, equality, and fraternity for the new millennium. Soviet soldiers enter Berlin in 1945 during the Red Army's final assault. The Battle of Berlin cost 81,000 Soviet lives in just 2 weeks. the war's last major engagement ending with Hitler's suicide and Germany's unconditional surrender ending. 6 years of devastating European conflict. British Army cobblers prepare boots for soldiers in 1914. WWR infantry walked an average of 25 miles daily, making properly fitted boots a genuine tactical necessity, with ill-fitting footwear causing trench foot that incapacitated more British soldiers than enemy fire during some campaigns. German refugees from Königsberg flee westward in horse-drawn wagons during the Soviet East Prussia offensive in January 1945. Approximately 2 million East Prussian civilians fled simultaneously in winter temperatures reaching -20 degrees Celsius, with tens of thousands perishing from cold, exhaustion, and Soviet attacks. A Native American surveys the newly completed Transcontinental Railroad in 1868. The Union Pacific and Central Pacific lines joined at Promontory Summit, Utah in 1869, opening lands the U.S. had promised to indigenous nations in perpetual treaties signed just years earlier. Competitors pose at Nottingham's Best Dressed Teddy Boy contest in 1956. The Teddy Boy subculture emerged in 1950s working-class Britain as young men spent entire weekly wages on Edwardian-inspired drape suits, creating Britain's first distinctly post-war youth identity and fashion rebellion. Senator John F. Kennedy consults privately with brother Robert during the 1960 presidential campaign. Robert served as campaign manager despite never having managed a campaign before, his ruthless organizational brilliance helping JFK defeat Richard Nixon by just 112,827 votes nationally. Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Lenny Dawson smokes a cigarette and drinks Fresca at halftime of Super Bowl I in 1967. The Chiefs lost 35-10 to the Green Bay Packers in a game so commercially unimportant that its original broadcast tapes were accidentally destroyed and discarded. Russian women wear traditional folk costumes in the 1890s. Each Russian region developed distinct embroidery patterns, headdress styles, and color combinations that immediately identified a woman's village origin, marital status, and social position to any knowledgeable observer within that community. Angolan child soldiers rest between operations during the 1976 Civil War. The conflict that began immediately after Portuguese colonial withdrawal recruited children as young as 8, with MPLA, FNLA, and UNITA factions all using child combatants supplied by Soviet, American, and South African backers. Miss Olympia's inaugural competition on August 30th, 1980, crowned Rachel McLish as women's bodybuilding's first champion. After decades of male-only competition, women finally gained their own professional bodybuilding stage, though judges immediately began penalizing competitors who appeared too muscular by their own standards. Burke Uzzell photographs a half-car navigating Washington streets in 1961. This peculiar vehicle, likely a custom-built economy experiment, captured the era's obsession with automobile miniaturization, as rising fuel costs and urban congestion made Americans question their devotion to full-sized cars. A member of Gaddafi's all-female Amazonian Guard, photographed in Libya, Gaddafi recruited and personally trained approximately 200 women as his elite bodyguards, claiming their presence humiliated any male attacker who fell to a woman's hand, according to Islamic cultural tradition. The 369th Infantry Regiment Harlem Hellfighters parades past New York's Flatiron Building after returning from France. The regiment spent 191 consecutive days in combat, more than any other American unit, returning as heroes while facing unchanged racial segregation at home. Civil rights leaders meet President Kennedy at the White House in 1963. The gathering followed the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech, with Kennedy privately expressing support while publicly hesitating to risk Southern Democratic votes for civil rights legislation. Audrey Hepburn poses in a ballet sequence in 1956. Trained seriously as a dancer in her youth, Hepburn used her genuine balletic training throughout her acting career, with her physical grace becoming as defining as her voice in creating cinema's most enduringly elegant screen presence. A daring lesbian couple poses in wedding attire in 1920 Budapest, one in suit, one in gown. Their defiant portrait representing extraordinary personal courage in an era when same-sex relationships were criminalized across most of Europe and carried severe social consequences. Gas-masked U.S. troops rehearsed trench assault tactics at San Francisco's Presidio Barracks in June 1918. Their intensive preparation reflected hard lessons from the Western Front, where chemical weapons had already killed 90,000 soldiers before America entered the conflict. U.S. 28th Infantry Division troops marched triumphantly down the Champs-Élysées on August 29, 1944. General de Gaulle insisted French forces lead the Liberation Parade, and these American troops marched directly from the parade route into active combat against remaining German resistance. Smiling locals offer flowers to Hungarian troops entering their town in 1939. Hungary's first Vienna Award had just returned to southern Slovakia and Carpathian Ruthenia, with ethnic Hungarian populations genuinely welcoming soldiers as liberators from Czechoslovak rule they had resented for 2 decades. U.S. Lieutenant William Robertson and Soviet Lieutenant Alexander Silvashko shake hands near Torgau, Germany on April 25, 1945. The Elbe River meeting symbolized Allied convergence that split Nazi Germany in two, effectively ending organized Wehrmacht resistance within days. A young David Attenborough stands at the beginning of a broadcasting career that would span 7 decades. Joining the BBC in 1952, he would eventually become the only person to win BAFTAs for programs in black and white, color, HD, 3D, and 4K television formats. Charles Oldreeve's custom-built tricycle photographed in 1882. This era produced thousands of experimental personal mobility concepts, as inventors worldwide raced to solve urban transportation before gasoline engines existed, with tricycles briefly outselling bicycles among wealthy Victorian consumers seeking stable recreational vehicles. A woman wearing a bikini was fined by authorities in 1957. The bikini had been invented just 11 years earlier in 1946, named after Bikini Atoll nuclear tests, with its designer predicting it would only be worn by women with perfect figures. A Parisian woman strides confidently carrying her baguette and 6 wine bottles. French law actually mandates baguette standards, requiring traditional versions contain only flour, water, yeast, and salt, with over 30,000 artisan boulangeries still producing 10 million baguettes consumed daily across France. Mount Vesuvius erupts violently as B-25 bombers fly overhead in March 1944. The eruption destroyed 88 Allied aircraft at Pompeii airfield, making it history's last major eruption and the only volcanic event to destroy a significant military Air Force asset during combat operations. Robert Pershing Wadlow, photographed at age 10 in 1928, born in Alton, Illinois in 1918, his pituitary gland disorder drove continuous growth throughout his life, reaching 8 feet 11 inches before his death at 22, making him history's tallest verified human being. Margaret Bourke White perches fearlessly atop the Chrysler Building in 1930. She used New York's gargoyles as dramatic photography platforms. Her dizzying urban portraits anticipating the groundbreaking Life magazine war photojournalism that made her America's first female accredited combat correspondent in World War II. An air hostess greets passengers at Visby Airport in 1925. Sweden's early commercial aviation was pioneering female cabin crew roles a full 3 years before Boeing Air Transport hired Ellen Church as America's first official flight attendant in 1930, establishing the profession globally. Ethnic Germans marked with N for Namek trudged through Czechoslovak snow in January 1946. Approximately 2.5 million Sudeten Germans were expelled following World War II under the Beneš Decrees, one of post-war Europe's largest forced population transfers driven by wartime collaboration and collective punishment. In 1945 Naples, women survived post-war uncertainty through informal means. The Allied occupation created a shadow economy where 90% of Neapolitans depended on black market goods, with American soldiers becoming unwitting economic lifelines for a civilian population facing genuine starvation. New York Latin Quarter, showgirls play chess backstage around 1958. The Latin Quarter was Manhattan's most glamorous nightclub, where performers between elaborate dance routines maintained an intellectual culture that contradicted the era's assumptions about showgirls' interests and capabilities beyond the stage. West Berliners watch silently as East German soldiers erect the Berlin Wall in August 1961. Constructed overnight without warning, the barrier divided 40,000 East Berliners from their West Berlin workplaces, splitting 3,000 families and permanently changing 50,000 daily commuters' lives forever. A troop ship crowded with jubilant American soldiers steams into New York Harbor in October 1945. Their Pacific homecoming marked the emotional conclusion of 4 years of global conflict that had permanently transformed the United States into history's undisputed dominant superpower. Argentine Nazi sympathizers hold an open rally in 1938 Buenos Aires. Approximately 45,000 German immigrants had settled in Argentina by this date, with the country's neutral wartime stance later making it the preferred destination for fleeing Nazi war criminals after Germany's defeat. North Vietnamese militia inspect a downed U.S. Navy Corsair near Hanoi. Pilot Lieutenant Musselman ejected and was listed missing in action until his remains were finally identified and repatriated to American soil in 1981, 16 years after his aircraft fell. English children leap across abandoned mattresses in an alley during the 1980s. Thatcher's deindustrialization policies devastated northern working-class communities, with unemployment reaching 15% nationally. Yet childhood creativity transformed even urban decay into playgrounds of extraordinary inventive energy. New York City subway cars covered in elaborate graffiti photographed in 1980. The graffiti movement that began in the late 1960s had transformed the entire transit system into a rolling art gallery, simultaneously representing urban decline and the birth of hip-hop visual culture. Antoni Gaudi's Sagrada Familia stands partially constructed in 1897. Gaudi devoted 43 years to the project, dying in 1926 after being struck by a tram, leaving plans for a building that remains under construction today and won't be completed until approximately 2026. A 1967 experimental helmet television concept imagined personal immersive viewing. This bizarre prototype predated virtual reality headsets by 3 decades, reflecting the post-war era's boundless technological optimism about miniaturization at a time when televisions still occupied entire living room corners. A young Jewish girl faces deportation to a Nazi concentration camp. Approximately 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered during the Holocaust, their systematic elimination representing one of history's most deliberate and methodical destructions of an entire generation of human potential. A convicted murderer endures public display in a wooden Kongui cage in 1930s China. This ancient punishment device, preventing the wearer from feeding themselves or sleeping comfortably, had been used continuously for over 2,000 years before finally being abolished by the Republican government. A victory train carries American soldiers home from Europe in 1945. While celebrating veterans crossed the Atlantic, 1.7 million American troops still faced Operation Downfall. The planned invasion of Japan projected to cost between 250,000 and 1 million American casualties. Windmill theater dancers rehearse wearing gas masks during London's 1940 Blitz. The theater famously never closed throughout the entire war, with management reasoning that Hitler would achieve a psychological victory if London's entertainment venues surrendered to the constant threat of aerial bombardment. New York debuts an armored Iron Man diving suit with electric systems and pressure protection in 1907. This atmospheric diving suit concept anticipated modern technology by decades. Though practical deep-sea exploration would require waiting for materials, science to catch up with the ambitious engineering vision. U.S. Navy sailors queue for payday aboard their cruiser in 1942. Naval pay during World War II ranged from $21 monthly for new recruits to $138 for experienced petty officers, with combat pay supplements barely compensating for the extraordinary dangers of Pacific naval service. An 1890 studio portrait dignifies individuals living with dwarfism. Victorian photography studios offered people with dwarfism rare opportunities for formal portraiture that affirmed their humanity, contrasting sharply with the circus sideshow culture that simultaneously exploited their physical differences for entertainment profit. Police officers demonstrate acrobatic physical training in 1940. Law enforcement agencies across America and Europe adopted theatrical public exhibitions during this era to improve their deteriorating public image following widespread Depression-era corruption scandals that had severely damaged civilian trust in police institutions. German children build towers from bundled banknotes in 1922. Germany's hyperinflation had reached such catastrophic levels that a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks by November 1923, with currency so worthless that workers demanded twice daily pay to purchase necessities before prices doubled again. A jobless man wears his CV as a sandwich board in 1930s. England, Depression-era unemployment peaked at 22% in Britain's industrial north, with millions of skilled workers reduced to desperate self-marketing strategies after traditional manufacturing industries collapsed virtually overnight following the 1929 Wall Street crash. Life magazine photographer Margaret Bourke-White documents Soviet frontlines in the 1940s. Her extraordinary access to both Allied and Soviet military operations made her simultaneously the most globally traveled war photographer and the first woman permitted to accompany American combat missions into active battle zones. Frank Sinatra stands alongside Judy Garland and teenage Liza Minnelli in 1958. Minnelli was just 12 years old in this photograph, already absorbing lessons in performance from two of the century's most naturally gifted entertainers, both of whom would profoundly shape her artistic development. A German army dentist performs an outdoor tooth extraction at a makeshift World War I field clinic in 1917. Dental disease incapacitated more soldiers than minor combat wounds, making forward dental units militarily essential as armies finally recognized oral health's direct impact on combat effectiveness.